I was driving to Yamanashi to go to a hotel in the countryside with my girlfriend for a birthday on the next day. We decided to go out at 11 p.m. for buying some alcohol and food at our local 7-Eleven to celebrate her B-day at midnight. Before going back to the hotel, I wanted to stop on a hill that's surrounded by a forest to see the stars and wish my girlfriend a happy birthday at midnight. I was slowly driving through the forest when I saw something floating above the road, almost a meter from my car. It looked like a glowing orb, but it was so fast, I couldn't really see it. Just passed in the corner of my eyes. At first, I thought my headlight shined on some spider web, but the orb was above the car hood and vanished when it hit the windshield. I didn't want to scare my girlfriend, so I acted like nothing happened and kept driving until we exited the forest. I asked her then if she saw something in the forest, and I could tell by her voice and her face that she was scared as much as me. We decided to go back to our hotel straight away and spend the rest of the night watching television to get our mind away from the scary thoughts. I have no logical explanation for what we saw, even if I tried my hardest to make it rational. I'm okay with the idea that some Japanese forests have spirits, and that we've seen one. My story goes back to September 2019, when I visited my girlfriend who lives in Japan. We decided to go to Shizuoka Prefecture in the countryside, in a hotel that looked like a ryokan, a traditional hotel with typical Japanese rooms. We couldn't have a big bed, so we had to sleep in two single beds. My girlfriend heard a sound like a whisper coming from the bathroom, and started to feel anxious about it but didn't tell me for fear of scaring us. We fall asleep in each single bed after a really tiring day of cycling in the surrounding mountains. I woke up at 2 a.m. in a sleep paralysis state. It's not my first time, so I know what I have to do. Calm down and try to wake myself up by talking, or at least trying. For people familiar with sleep paralysis, you often feel looked by a shadow, and its presence slowly creeps you out. My girlfriend, who was already anxious, woke up to see me blabbering some sound and making scary faces as I struggled to speak. She freaked out so much, and it took at least a minute before I managed to make myself up. So I asked her why she didn't try to wake me up, and she said that the sound she heard made her so scared that she thought that a spirit had possessed me and was trying to reach out to her. I told her where the shadow I saw in my dream came from, and she told me that the sound from the same place. We were so convinced a spirit was in the room that we couldn't fall back asleep before the sunrise. We had to share a single bed for the rest of the night. I tried to rationalize and think the sound came from another room, but no client was staying close to us. And that she freaked out because I was having paralysis, and it's normal to see shadows when it happens. Something really mysterious happened in that hotel. We'll definitely remember that experience. So a driver from a nearby town, like 15 kilometers from where I live, was on a call to drive people to the airport in the capital, like 200 kilometers away. So he takes them, drops them off at the airport, and then parks his car in the taxi lines, hoping someone will be traveling to a place along the way back, so he'll make some money. A couple approaches him, and they tell him that they need to get to a place midway between my town and his town. He agrees. So they load the luggage in the car, they hop in, and start driving back. They have all kinds of talk in the car. You know, the talkative taxi drivers here. Family, why travel abroad, all those kind of things. And they finally arrive. They invited him inside, and he didn't really want to go. But since they insisted, he went inside. They have coffee and talk more, and finally the driver decides he needs to go, so they pay him for the ride and he leaves. He approaches his car outside, but when he reaches in his pocket for the key, he doesn't have it, and he remembers that he left it on the table. He goes back to the house, knocks on the door and waits. He knocks again, yet nobody opens. Normally, he gets a bit frustrated and starts shouting for someone to open the door. The neighbours come out and ask him what's the problem, and he explains. They're in shock, and they tell him that the couple that lived there died a few years back. He insists this story is true, but they also insist they are dead. He shows them the money they'd just given him for the ride, and finally he decides to call the police. The police arrive, they bust open the door, and they go inside. He found his keys, with 3 coffee mugs still warm on the table. Nobody else inside the house. I'm a cinephotographer and photographer, and pretty well known locally. I had a local artist text me about a video, and after a bunch of scheduling and paperwork, we got a date, some plans, and a few places. Everything was normal, and we shot at a few different places throughout the day into the afternoon. We had a large group. I took a few photos for them, kept doing the video, and everything was fine. One of the guys had a place he mentioned that everyone in their group knew about, so I just said it was fine and we drove there. It's about 15 minutes or so from the town, off the highway on some back road neighbourhood, right by the guy's house. It was a house that was still currently being finished, and pretty much had everything done besides a few minor things like the flooring, walls and cabinets. By this time it was 9:15, have the time of the picture on my phone, and pretty dark out. We went around the back so that the neighbours didn't see a bunch of kids just run into this house that clearly isn't ours. They lit up a couple blunts, we smoked, took a few more photos, and got back to shooting. We started in the unfinished basement and worked our way upstairs. We went to a back room that smelled extremely weird. All of us smelled it. I'm not sure if this is related or if ghosts have anything to do with smells, but it was definitely off. Not necessarily anything dead or anything rotting, but it wasn't a good smell, and not something I can put my finger on. We shot in the back room and everything was fine, although the guy's girlfriend stopped participating in the video. Not sure if that was related either. We moved to the kitchen and discovered the lights actually turned on. We assumed since no one was living in it, although it wasn't necessarily abandoned, it just wouldn't have running water and electricity, etc. This helped a lot, so we used it so that I didn't have to use my lamps anymore. We continued to shoot again in the kitchen, and everything was still going okay. Nothing weird besides the smell in the back room. We had one more clip to shoot that day, because everyone was tired and the energy was off. There was a room next to the back room with a hole in the floor. The plan was to shoot a video of him singing into the camera from the hole in the floor, while he was standing in the basement with lamps on him. This was a room they knew about, and I hadn't seen it yet. I went back there to check out the hole and see if the scene was doable. We flicked on the lights, and I was looking through the hole to make sure it would work well, and decided it would. The room was hitting me and my girlfriend hard with the smell, so I told everyone to hurry up because it stinks, and all of us are tired. They're standing in the kitchen at this point. Now, a little interjection to give some background. My girlfriend practices a bit of regular witchcraft. Nothing dark, but the general things. Obviously she's not a psychic, but the reason she started the practice is because she feels auras. She can't identify them, but rather point out when she feels a change, and can usually pinpoint the aura by how it makes her feel. So if she feels an aura and it radiates happiness, it reflects and she can feel it. This one wasn't so happy. Within seconds of me telling them again to hurry up and go downstairs, my girlfriend gives me a whisper and says, they really need to hurry up, because this room feels really weird. Now obviously I didn't think anything of it, as I barely had time to. I didn't care. In retrospect, she never talks about the auras and that they shouldn't have totally been a sign that she felt bad. But I didn't have time to react anyway. As soon as she said that power goes out in every room, as if it were almost reacting to what she said or something. The guys were all still in the kitchen, so of course all switches and breakers were untouched. I've probably only ran that fast a few times in my life. I'm talking a 4.7 40 time at max, and I was a pretty big guy at the time. There's so many things it could have been. but a lot of rational explanations are eliminated when I try to identify exactly what happened. It's not necessarily that the lights went out and we dipped, but more or less that the lights went out, and then we all felt whatever aura my girlfriend mentioned. I explained to them what happened between me and my girlfriend, left my phone and lamp there, and just called it a night. The next afternoon, I went back for my lamp and phone, but the back door was locked this time, and the neighbour was actually eyeballing out the window. I just took the L. It's all replaceable. My family and I moved into a new house in December of 2015. We had no issues until we decided to open up the attic door and look around up there in mid to late September of 2018. Flash forward to October 10th of the same year, a few weeks after we entered the attic and found nothing. I settled down with my dogs to go sleep at a relatively early time, 9:30 or 10 maybe, but that doesn't matter. I get to sleep with both of my dogs on me to get woken up by some knocks on my room door. Now, my room door doesn't latch, and it never has since we moved in. You come into my room from the hallway, and you can just push the door to get in. You don't have to turn the handle. Back to the night of. I forgot to look at the time, but in the dead of night there was a series of knocks on my door that woke me and my dogs up. The crazy thing is, my door didn't swing open, meaning the knocks were coming from inside my room. I wasn't as scared as I probably should have been, so I moved both of my barking dogs off of me and ran into the hallway. Then out into my dining room, which is connected to the kitchen and living room and has a clear view of both my front and back door. I was making sure no one broke in. Of course, they hadn't. I walk back to my room, calm my dogs down and get back to sleep. Not 20 minutes later, I'm woken up again by a loud thud that by then, I'm too tired to check out. When I got up in the morning, I realised it was a hanging calendar that fell. Nothing happens the first half of the day. I mentioned everything to my family and they said they heard me get up, but heard no knocking and no falling calendar, which shouldn't be, because my sister's room is directly across from mine on the other side of the hallway. Life goes on as normal until we eat supper and sit at the table to play some board games. We were in the middle of a dinosaur-themed Monopoly. My nephew loves dinosaurs. When my two dogs started barking at a corner with a bookshelf in it. Now, as cliché as it is, there was nothing there. We even went as far to stand in the corner and wave our hands around to prove there was no one there to our barking, growling dogs. It took some hands-on attention to get them to stop barking and growling, and by then, my niece and nephew were on the verge of tears because they were scared of what was happening and what happened the previous night. Besides our dogs barking at nothing, another weird fact is that one of the walls making up the corner, they saw something in was shared with my room where the knocking happened early that morning. And then it stopped. The night of October 10th and the day of October 11th of 2018 is the only time I ever had scary stuff happen to my family and me. Nothing was in our attic, no boxes or belongings of previous owners, but I really feel that we woke something up messing around up there and had it terrify our family just once. Then it moved on to wherever it wanted to, leaving us be for the following 2 years, hopefully longer. I've never mentioned this to anyone besides my close family, and we've all wordlessly agreed to not talk about it much, in fear of it happening again. Of course, I wasn't done. I bought a Ouija board that December and talked my mom into trying it with me. My sister is scared of them, so she never learned about it. We sat down one December night at around 11, when everyone was asleep and started. Over the course of half an hour, we talked with someone named Tamra, who was born in 51, and who claimed to have died by a gun. I did a bit of research the following day and found an obituary for Tamra May Q. She was born in a neighbouring town in, you guessed it, 1951. She passed in 2014 from some form of cancer, bless her soul, but no mention of a gun in the obituary. The coincidence of matching name and date of birth was enough to tell me that whatever happened the night of October 10th, 2018, might have been the doing of Tamra. I just wish I knew what she wanted and why she wanted us to know she was there. Was she a friend of the previous owner, who passed in 2017? Was she angry when she pounded on my door and knocked down my calendar? Will she come back? I'll never know. This happened to me when I was a little girl. I was 7 years old at the time and I got really scared. Me and my parents had just moved into this new house. My parents had been looking all over town for some place to live for about a month or so. The house wasn't really big, but there were only three of us, so it was fine. I remember that from day one, I didn't like it. The paint outside was yellow and peeling. The garden was a dirty mess, and the doors inside the house had scratches. The owner said they were from a dog. When my dad showed me my room with my bed and toys ready, I remember getting this weird feeling, and I told him that I'd rather live somewhere else. He just smiled and assured me that we wouldn't rent the house forever, and that this place was just temporary. My encounter with a ghost in that house happened in the first few weeks living there. It was a Saturday, and the thing that comes to my mind first when I remember it is that I was having a great day, and that I'd been laughing before it occurred. The fact that I was happy and not at all thinking about what might be lurking in the house is what scares me the most. You don't really expect bad things happening when you're having a good time. I was with both my mom and dad in their bedroom, watching a comedy on the TV. We were all laughing our butts off when my mom told me that she bought me some chocolates from her workplace and that it was in the fridge in the kitchen. She told me to bring it back to share while we watched the movie. As a child, you can imagine this was awesome news for me. Chocolate and a movie was as good as it gets. I climbed out of their bed and walked to the kitchen. As I said before, the house was small, so the kitchen was really just a few steps away from my parents' room. The light was off, but I could see well since the light from my parents' bedroom lit the hallway, as well as the refrigerator. I opened the door of the fridge, saw the candy bar, and that's when it hit me. Someone was sitting on the couch behind me. I turned and stared straight into some very white eyes with black pupils. The thing was sitting on our couch looking at me with no expression. It was all dark like a shadow. It seemed male and it had inhumanly long legs that stretched oddly onto the floor. The legs seemed to be misshapen and bent awkwardly on the knees. I remember looking at it and not being able to breathe. It didn't move. It just kept staring at me. I screamed bloody murder and my dad quickly came to me and asked what was wrong. After he asked the second time, I was able to catch my breath. I told him of the person or thing on the couch. Of course, by then there was nothing, just our purple couch with no one on it. My parents exchanged a look and told me it was nothing and that I had just imagined it. We went back to their room to finish the movie and they let me spend the night with them since I couldn't stop shaking. That night I didn't sleep, nor did I ever sleep well again in that house. I never saw it again, but had this lingering feeling of being watched. Years later, when I was around 16, my dad and I were talking about how we were used to move houses a lot, and I mentioned to him the yellow house. He got serious and told me that when I screamed that night, he thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me and simply discarded it. A few nights later, he was coming home from work around 6 a.m. He worked the night shift at times, when he saw someone staring out of the living room's window. He said it was a dark face and that he could only see some big eyes. He came running to the door and called for my mom as soon as he opened it. There was no one in the living room, and my mom was asleep with me in their bedroom. He told me that he never mentioned it to me or my mom, so as not to scare us, and he just started looking for a new place. We lived there less than a year, and I didn't see it again. My unit in the US Army was deployed to Iraq in April of 2006. We were in Ramadi. It was 123 kilometers out of Baghdad. I was in a Humvee headed to Baghdad for emergency leave due to a death in my family. It was close to midnight. The Humvee I was in with 3 others and a turret gunner, with 2 other Humvee, same 5 total people. 1 in front, 1 in back. I was without a weapon due to my leave. The Humvee in front stopped hard, and we all figured it was a possible IED or VB IED. The team leader in our HV radioed to the lead HV. The convo went along these lines. Military radio jargon, HV2. What's up? Why did you stop? Something flew in front of the HV. What? Flew in front of the HV? Yes. We didn't see anything. And the third HV piped in, does anyone hear that? Hello? Yes. Then our HV, yes, but I don't see it. Did the other two vehicles? Just then in the desert off the highway was a black figure. It looked like a huge bird. It looked like smoke was emitting a blackish, greenish smoke with a bit of blue tinge. We all focused our eyes. The two troops with better nods, night vision, could see something but couldn't make out what it was. The smoke was distorting the view. Within a second or two, a rock was thrown at one of the Humvees. A big rock like the size of a head. We all froze due to the rules of engagements. We couldn't just light it up. We used a spotlight, and in that light, something just flew straight up. And it was loud. And then we heard a loud screeching noise. Within a minute, it was over. We all sat there in a state of shock, curiosity, and panic. What the fuck was that? When we got to Baghdad, the translator that they were picking up to bring to the Marines that were with us, he said, sounds like you encountered an Ifrit. The team leader said, a what? An Ifrit, a winged jinn. We were all a bit speechless. We chose not to disclose to our command the winged thing, as battle fatigue, now known as PTSD, was a career killer at this juncture. It's been 13 years since that happened. I met my now husband in 2015, and he had also been deployed to Ramadi with my sister unit at the time, and he had gone through this particular stretch of highway on his mid-deployment leave. He recounted a similar story to me. It was enough to stop me in my tracks. It was pretty close to mine, except they didn't stop, they just boogied on through. Considering the time we were there was very deadly, including an aid station manned by soldiers that was ambushed and blown to bits, I was a medic, so death was my norm. I still can't wrap my head around it, and now, apparently the last two places I live in, it followed us. So early this morning at the same time, on the same back channel, the smoke detector went off. It was exactly 2:33. Every night at 2:33, something makes its presence known. If you don't acknowledge it, there's hell to pay. Let's recap. On Wednesday morning at 2:33, my husband came bursting into my office. On nights, I work Tuesday into Wednesday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'll sleep in my office so as not to wake the family. He came bursting into my office as I was in a good sleep. He said, "What the fuck are you eating? What did you burn?" I told him I had no clue what he was talking about. I told him, I've been asleep since around 11 o'clock. He got really mad and told me I was lying so he could smell it. I was so confused, but I could smell what he was talking about. I could smell a burnt smell, sulphurous, stench. I told my hubs I was definitely asleep. He said, I heard the cupboard open and then I smelled something burning. He was really upset. I was still very confused. I was sleeping. So about a minute after that happened, we hear one of the smoke detectors beep, like when you push the reset button. So early this morning at 2:33, it happens again. This time we called the fire department to come check them out. By 3:40, they were done checking for hot spots in the walls, floors, kitchen, etc., and nothing out of the ordinary. They checked the fuse box, nothing, pull pump, anything that could have caused a surge in power resetting the smoke detectors. I finally lay down to go to sleep. I dozed off for what felt like hours. It was only 3 minutes or so. While in my sleep, I felt like something was watching me intensely. Note, it was not sleep paralysis. I wasn't unable to move, but scared enough my Apple Watch let me know my resting heart rate was 115. A normally slow heart rate whether resting or light workouts is in the 50s. Then, the smoke detector blared again, and I heard a loud crashing noise come from the kitchen. Everyone heard it. We all met in the kitchen to see what it was. There was nothing really out of place except a candle was knocked over and lit. Everyone was asleep and there was no reason why it was lit. We put all the candles out before bed but had not lit any tonight. You can hear it if anyone from the bedrooms was coming in or out of them. We were all really freaked out. So we said good night and it was quiet. We've decided we'll tell it good night tonight from here on out and see what happens. Anyone else experienced alarms or loud crashes, but nothing thrown around or smashed? Let me give some background. I've worked in careers with a lot of death, destruction, and mayhem. First the military at the beginning and height of 2 conflicts, as a firefighter and as an FF and medic. As well as experiencing my own personal tragedies, I've seen shadow figures and caught things out of the corner of my eye. I've experienced things being thrown that cannot move on their own. All the typical, my house is haunted, great stuff. But on Saturday, nothing as scary and conclusive as this. My other half, we'll call him Jake for clarity purposes, C, is the customer on the phone and M is me. Saturday, I had to work the early shift and my now easy remote job, meaning I work from home. My other half was on a runner. He started drinking on Friday after work into Saturday. Both being veterans, we like to weekend warrior it sometimes, drinking way too much. So he's laying on the couch last I see him. I took a phone call for work around 9:15ish. While in the middle of the call, something scary, surreal, and kind of fascinating happens. Thank you for calling. My company's name. This is Lindsay. How can I help you? Some convo about what he needs in the middle of telling him something. A white stream of thick smoke passes my face, and I instantly smell a Marlboro Red. At this time, I didn't realise Jake had left the house, buzzed. Hello, did I lose you? No, I'm here. Sorry for something. I mean, what the fuck? Yeah, can you give me a second to catch my breath? Sure, you okay? Yeah, I'm not sure. Here's the number 2, our contracting location. Hung up and proceeded to search the house for Jake. Opened the garage door and cars are gone. It was at this point I'm thinking he's dead. Oh my god, the love of my life is gone. I called the ER, no traumas had come in. Same with PD, no arrest for DUI or traumas. I'm a bit relieved. I call Jake's phone and I hear ringing. Yeah, he left his phone. I call all the friends I can think of where he would have gone. Voicemail. Text a friend, have you seen Jake? No, sorry. Get a hold of the friend we were supposed to be meeting at 1 o'clock. No, haven't seen him. Okay, thanks. At this time I'm having a heart attack. Finally, I got a call from him. He's at a friend's house that I had called first. I'm relieved and pissed. So Saturday night after he sobers up, I relent and tell him about the cig smoke and the smell. Jake's mum died when he was very young, 10 years old. His mum died very traumatically. This is where I now truly believe spirits, ghosts, and the afterlife exists. I was sitting at my desk and a puff of smoke and the smell of Marlboro Reds passed right by me. The smoke looked like a twisted ribbon of smoke. It was so weird. Jake. What? What are you talking about? Today, while working, it happened. Come on, be real. I am being real. This man knows when I'm being serious and when I'm not. He looks at me and takes interest. For a long time, we've thought his mum or another family member was with us, but never really paid it much mind. Jake, going a little pale. Mom smoked Marlboro Reds. My mom, when she blows the smoke out, would come out looking like a twist, because she would twist her tongue. I didn't know she smoked. Yeah, I know, because I never told you. Just a second after he said that, we could both smell ciggies. It got really cold next to us, and then the vertical blinds on our sliding glass door moved really fast, like a huge gust of wind pushed them. I have other instances of what we think is her. Has anyone ever experienced this type of contact before? So I bought my first house when I was 22, after my son was born. I just moved to the south and fell in love with an old plantation homes, so it made sense for me to buy my own. It was a gorgeous, huge brick colonial, and it was also a foreclosure, so I got it super cheap. However, it sat vacant for many years and needed to pretty much be gutted and completely redone. My husband and I couldn't wait to start construction. Unfortunately, as soon as we started renovating, that's when weird little things started happening. Floors creaking, things moved or missing, nothing too bad. I've always been open to the paranormal, so I didn't think too much of it until my son was involved. It was just my son and I home, and our family doggo. I was in the laundry room and my son was in the living room, which was right by the laundry room. I could see him from the room while folding clothes. Well, I turned my back for a second to load the dryer, and when I finished I looked back, but my son was no longer playing on the floor, but I could hear his baby babbling self talking to someone. He was sitting on the staircase, and before I could get to him, I overheard him say something to the effect of, "I don't want to play now," and it was directed to someone clearly upstairs. I just kind of brushed it off and brought him back into the living room with me and turned on some cartoons. Not even 5 minutes later, out of the blue, all these balls from an inflatable ball pit come flying down the stairs and roll into the living room right by where he's sitting. At this point, I'm freaking the hell out, so I load him and the dog up and we played at the park until my husband was off work. We had a ton more legit encounters, but nothing that scared me like this. From our living room, if you're sitting at the end of the couch, you can see directly into the kitchen where I have a baker's rack, and on the bottom of it is a wine rack. One night it was just the hub and I laying on the couch, and we saw a wine bottle just come off the rack, land gracefully on the kitchen floor, and just start spinning. Super weird. Turns out the house went into foreclosure due to the previous owner dying literally the exact same day my son was born, almost to the exact hour. Something tells me she never left her home. Giles Garnier, also known as the Werewolf of Dole, was a French hermit and cannibal, serial murderer convicted of being a werewolf. According to his testimony at trial, Garnier was in the forest hunting one night, trying to find food for himself and his wife. A spectre appeared to him, offering to ease his troubles, and gave him an ointment that would allow him to change into the form of a wolf, making it easier to hunt. Garnier confessed to having eaten as many children between the ages of 9 and 12. In October 1572, his first victim was a 10-year-old girl whom he dragged into a vineyard outside of Dole. He strangled her and ate the flesh from her thighs and arms. When he had finished, he removed some flesh and took it home. Weeks later, Garnier savagely attacked another girl, biting and clawing her, but was interrupted by passers-by then fled. The girl succumbed to her injuries and died a few days later. In November, Garnier killed a 10-year-old boy, again cannibalizing him by eating from his thighs and belly and tearing off a leg to save for later. In 1572, he brutally attacked an unknown boy who was passing by and cut the boy in half by biting and tearing his belly. In 1573, he strangled a girl, ate her flesh, tore away her left leg, and took her home. Garnier was finally arrested and found guilty of crimes of lycanthropy and witchcraft, and was burned at the stake on January 18th, 1573. More than 50 witnesses deposed that he had attacked and killed children in the fields, devouring their raw flesh. They claimed that he was sometimes seen in human shape, sometimes as a werewolf. I was on a road trip to Leh, India, with my elder brother in August 2015, and we started from New Delhi. First destination on the card was Manali, which is 550 kilometers and around a 14-hour journey. We started early at 4 a.m. and targeted 9 p.m. to reach Manali. We maintained the pace quite well until heavy rains in Mandi, Himachal Pradesh, made it impossible to ride further. We were nearly 120 kilometers away from Manali and it was 6 p.m, but rain made us stop for 2 good hours and the sunlight was lost. Everyone who had been on the hills told me not to ride at night, but never specified why. I consider it as generic advice, as you cannot see anything beyond the roads at night and pitch black surroundings makes it hard to ride bikes. As soon as the rain stopped, we resumed our journey, but now we were slower than before due to slippery roads and less visibility, as rain had not stopped completely. I remember a board stating Manali was 44 kilometers, and since it was a single lane, one-sided road, we were sure to cover it in the next 2 hours, making us reach by 11 p.m. I saw a white building on my right. It was brightly lit and looked amazing. Next was a small bridge where a red Tata Nano was parked on the left. And then I saw a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. Nothing unusual, right? My brother was left a little behind as he was facing some troubles with his luggage tied to the rear seat of his bike. I was indeed riding alone. Then, after some time riding on a single way, I saw an astonishing and brightly lit white building on my right. Then a small bridge where a red Tata Nano was parked. Then a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. Could be a coincidence. Government buildings are mostly the same, and people love Tata Nano anyway. And, cars and calves are next to the human population of India. My brother was still not in sight. I called him, and he said to move ahead. He'll catch up. I moved ahead. Let me tell you, I am indeed a good rider on hills. I maintained 80 kilometers an hour even in those conditions. So this time I slowed down to catch up with my brother. All this while, I didn't see a single vehicle coming from the other side or overtaking me. My brother was definitely far behind, and I wasn't drunk or high either. I lived clean. No alcohol, no drugs, no smoking either. I saw a brightly lit white building on my right, a small bridge with a Tata Nano parked on the left, and a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. This was the time I realized something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I stopped there and waited for my brother to catch up. He came after a good 15 minutes and asked me why I had stopped. I told him about what I saw, and he said he didn't see anything like this and had been riding straight for some time. I asked him to lead the way and I followed. I still remember what we saw and made us weak in the knees. It still chills my spine while writing. We saw a brightly lit white building on the right, a small bridge where a Tata Nano was parked, and a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. I shouted, pleaded, apologized, cursed, and asked for forgiveness if we did something wrong. We stopped there for a few minutes, as none of us had courage to move ahead. We prayed to the gods, known or unknown, and started one more time. Just 2 kilometers ahead, we saw a board which said Manali 40 kilometers. Neither my brother saw it before, nor did I. I still don't know what it was. Was it a parallel time which didn't reflect my brother, who said I was ahead only 15 minutes while I rode for nearly 2 hours? Or was it a supreme power trying to save us from something ominous, as the weather ahead was really bad, and we could actually touch the clouds with our bare hands? We told this to one man we met in Keelong, only after he told us about something similar happening to him, long back on the same route. I moved into a historic house after college with one other roommate. For just the two of us, the house was massive. We had a spare bedroom that we just put makeup vanities in and called our glam room. My roommates moved in a few weeks before me and kept asking me to come spend the night because she was creeped out by the house. Fair enough, it's large and creaks at night. After I moved in, I got really bad vibes. It was hard to feel comfortable in the house, even though it was aesthetically beautiful. My cat would stare into the hallway eyes wide and growl at nothing in the middle of the night. If I had to pass the glam room on the way to the bathroom, the lights would sometimes flicker on and off. Due to our work schedules, I'd be in the glam room getting ready after my roommate was already gone for the day. We were rarely in there at the same time. Every morning, I'd turn the lights on to get ready, and the lights would dim and sometimes flicker. It happened so frequently that I put it off as old house, shitty wiring, and got used to it. A month before I moved out, I was sitting on my bed with my cat asleep next to me while I was reading. I heard a man whisper in my ear. I'm chuckling while writing this, but at the time I panicked. He said, "Ta-da," like a performer, but in a really low monotone voice. I freaked out and left the room to go downstairs. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Sometimes we'd hear distinct footsteps walking around upstairs when no one was up there. I was ready to move at that point. After we moved somewhere else together, we would joke about our haunted house. I mentioned the lights flickering every time I'd get ready in the spare bedroom in the shitty wiring. My roommate just stared at me. She said she'd never seen them do that and didn't know what I was talking about. I've lived in the same house all my life. However, the subdivision was built shortly before I was born, so we're the first people to ever live in our house. You'd think that would keep the otherworldly guests to a minimum, but I haven't been so lucky. My neighbourhood surrounds a 100-plus-year-old mental hospital. These days, the facility is bright and new and incredibly forward-thinking, but it has a rather dark past of its own, including lobotomy, TB treatment, a short time as a war hospital that will go on to house many soldiers suffering from PTSD, etc. So a very eventful history. Years and years ago, they also used the majority of the land the houses in the area are built on to farm. This was actually how a lot of the patients made livings in their downtime. I was unaware of this for a very long time though. Ever since I was a kid, things of mine would go missing, only to reappear in places I had never put them, and no one else would either. I was a very particular kid, and we would later find out my particular habits are due to OCD. The first time it really happened with something big, it was my diary. I wrote in this thing every day and put it back in the same spot when I was done. My parents gave me that privacy because they trusted me, and they probably wouldn't have been able to read my little second grade scribbles anyway. To this day, they swear up and down they didn't touch it. When I say I looked everywhere, I mean everywhere. I had a full force meltdown when I didn't find the book. My parents searched the whole house, but to this day, we've never found it. Over the years, lots of things would go missing. Papers I needed to study, pencils I just put down, my pliers, and they would only ever return within days of me audibly asking for them back. This isn't limited to my room either. One day, I went downstairs to make breakfast, turned around briefly, and when I looked back, a cupboard was open, and my smoothie cup was placed neatly on the counter. Another time, I lost a ring in my car. Couldn't find it anywhere, and to my surprise, it appeared on my desk one morning. After asking my parents, they were both as surprised as me. On another occasion, it was one of those quick grabs of something I just put down. After an unsuccessful search, I stood up, closed my eyes, and said something along the lines of, "I needed that thing for what I'm doing. Can I please have it back soon?" To my surprise, the missing object laid about a foot in front of me upon opening my eyes. "You bet," I said, "thanks." A few months ago, and this ghost had come to a truce. I gave it a bin of things of its own and all went well. No more missing objects. I was still curious about what exactly the thing was, so I contacted a friend who's into this sort of thing, and they recommended I try using a pendulum. After much conversation via the pendulum, I've come to know my ghost as Eli. He was about 16 when he died in the 1910s, and used to work on the hospital farm. He seems to think of me as a friend and admits to swiping my things now and again. He likes my friends, and when he thinks I've been cooped up for too long, he pushes my door open. We get along really well, but I do think he was confused for a while when I stopped leaving the house. I told him about COVID-19, and he seems to not mind me being in my room all day anymore. When my mum was in her late teens, her friend's father was an employee on the now docked ship and hotel, the Queen Mary. For those who don't know its history, the ship is renowned as one of the most haunted places to visit in America. Has had plenty of deaths and unexplained encounters aboard over the years, and while ferrying troops during World War II, collided with an escort ship, resulting in the deaths of over 300 men. My mother and a friend, being mischievous, decided to tour all the places inaccessible to guests and try to summon ghosts by taunting them. They walked around below deck, in boiler rooms and hallways all over, shouting things like, "We don't believe in ghosts, come out and prove us wrong." Then they reached the hull, at the bow of the ship where it struck its escort in 1942, a mostly empty, cavernous area where their continued jeers echoed loudly off the metal walls. Suddenly, they heard what my mother describes as a deafening sound, made up of a combination of sounds. Metal screeching and the ship groaning, as well as a sort of high-pitched human screaming and low moaning filled the chamber. But these sounds were not distinct. They were all one sound, like a menacing, cursed throat song. It was a sound unlike anything they'd ever heard, or would hear again. The two teens were utterly shocked and terrified. They reached the closest elevator as fast as they could, their game abruptly over and done. But the spirits evidently were not. As the elevator operator led them topside, the three were surrounded by the unmistakable prominent sound of rushing water. At this point, they wondered for a split second if they were being tricked, grasping for a logical explanation. To their horror, however, the operator was white as a sheet and hastily dialing for help on the elevator phone. Of course, there wasn't any water. The employee on the other end was overwhelmed and perplexed, but that sound persisted to swirl around them while they all too slowly approached the deck, and they could swear by it that the car was hastily filling up. The girls couldn't get off the Queen Mary fast enough. No one on board could explain what happened. Everyone was shaken. An encounter that lasted a matter of minutes seemed like hours and left the girls trembling and transformed. My mother never took the topic of ghosts lightly after that. She wouldn't let me have a Ouija board either. First, the backstory for context. At the time of my paranormal experience, the neighbourhood that our house is in was not the safest. It was a very lower income neighbourhood in the heart of a large metropolitan city, in the early stages of development and gentrification. When we moved in, 3 of the 5 houses bordering our property were legit drug houses. In my neighbourhood at that time, it was best to keep yourself, mind your own business, and not bring any attention to yourself. Our immediate next door neighbours had constant traffic in and out of their house, and it was very obvious what was going on. Drugs. We always minded our business, but I tried to still be cordial and say hi and wave if my neighbour was outside at the same time as me. He was always polite to me, but he had very limited interaction. Sometimes, some of the neighbours' customers would make me very uncomfortable by watching me, catcalling me or saying sexually and racially derogatory things if I was outside, doing yard work, taking trash out, or getting out of my car. I would just ignore them and quickly go inside. But these interactions made me feel very uncomfortable, and I didn't feel safe if I was home alone without my husband. 2 weeks after the paranormal experiences that I'm about to share, we woke up in the middle of the night to a lot of commotion, and when I looked out our bedroom window, I saw the cops raiding our neighbour's house. I found out later from news reports that the owners were charged with distributing heroin, powder cocaine, fentanyl, and crack cocaine. They also had a large stock of illegal firearms, a significant amount of cash, and one of the individuals living there was on the run, wanted on murder and robbery charges, and he was hiding out in this house during the paranormal incident that I'm about to describe. Now, to the paranormal event. It was late one night, after midnight, and my husband and dog were asleep in our bedroom. I was in the kitchen, and bent over the trash can to take the bag out, and then take it out to our recycling bin on the side of my house so that the trash did not stink up my kitchen overnight. To get to the bin outside, I just walked to my front door and to the side of the house, due to the way that the property is set up. When I was bent over the trash can, getting ready to pull the bag out, I felt what I thought was my husband walk up right behind me and lean over me like he was about to hug me. He is 6'3", I am 5'4", so he towers over me. I giggle and bend down further to dodge him, and turn around quickly as I say, "I hug you first." And just as I turn and went to grab him around the waist to give him a bear hug, I saw a woman standing in the middle of my kitchen about 4 feet away from me. She instantly put her arms out towards me with her palms open, like you would do when you're telling someone to stop, and she floated and glided quickly towards me while she mouthed, "No." And as soon as she got inches from me, she literally vanished into thin air. In one instant, she was gliding so quickly towards me, and the next, she just disappeared. I didn't hear anything, but her face had an expression of panic, and even though I didn't hear her yell it, her mouth screamed no. This happened so fast, literally in a span of 2 or 3 seconds. The only details about her appearance that I could recall was that she was completely solid, not transparent or translucent. She was wearing a long, black, long-sleeved dress with a white, double-layered scalloped collar. The cuffs of her sleeve were slightly belled. There was little white buttons going down the entire length of the front of her dress. She was about my height. Her eyes were strikingly light blue, and she had long, very thick, tight, curly, and very unruly jet black hair. She had pale skin, and she was floating a few feet above the ground. It happened so quickly, and those were the only details I could remember immediately. I was in such shock and disbelief. Immediately after she vanished, I stood still for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. Then I bolted past where she was just a few seconds before and ran into my bedroom screaming for my husband to wake up. He instantly jumped out of bed and grabbed me and asked what was wrong, and I started crying. And all I could manage to sputter out was, "Someone is in our house." Before I could explain further, he grabbed his pistol from his nightstand and ran out of the bedroom to find the intruder. Our dog, a 90-pound pit bull, who was in our bedroom at the time, also woke up and immediately started growling and barking at the entrance to our bedroom. He got in between me and the bedroom door frame and was barking and growling incessantly. I heard my husband calling for the dog for backup, and the dog refused to go to my husband, which is very out of character. My husband came back to our bedroom and said he didn't find anyone, and that all of the doors and windows were locked and there was no sign of a break-in. I told him he wouldn't find anything or anyone because it wasn't a person but a spirit. At this point, my skeptic husband rolled his eyes and started berating me for waking him up with stupid ghost stories. But when he saw that I was so legitimately scared and shaken up, he sat down and asked me to explain what happened. After I told him the story, he just chalked it up to me hallucinating due to stress from work and insomnia, and held me until I finally fell asleep. The next day, I FaceTimed my mom and told her what happened because I knew she would believe me, because she grew up in a haunted house and has seen apparitions before. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy or hallucinating. When I described what the woman looked like, she fell silent and had a look of shock on her face. She told me that the woman I described was my great-grandmother Gabriella, who my mother was extremely close to. She died before I was born. I've never seen a picture of her because the only photos that the family had of her were in a box that was lost in the 50s, during my grandparents' move to the States. However, my mother said that my grandmother still had my great-grandmother's dress that she made herself and wore almost every day. The next weekend, I took a trip across the state to see my grandmother with my mother, and I told her what happened. We spent the day in her attic looking for the dress. My mother found it in a suitcase, and when she pulled it out, I was in disbelief. It was the same dress that the woman I saw was wearing. Long black dress with slightly flared and belled sleeves, small white buttons along the length of the front of the dress, and the unmistakable double-layered white collar with the scalloped edges. After discussing everything with my mother and grandmother, we all believed that on that night, my great-grandmother Gabriella stopped me from taking the trash outside to protect me from someone outside. It's the only thing I can think of, especially considering the contents, crime, and questionable people that were always present outside of my front door, so close to me. I truly believe that I'd taken the trash out that night. I may have seen something that I shouldn't have, a drug deal in progress, or been assaulted by one of the neighbour's customers that would threaten and sexually harass me. Luckily for us, after the drug raid, the neighbour's house was foreclosed. A developer bought the house and tore it down to build a new home. The neighbourhood has done a 180 and been cleaned up, and our property has increased in value tenfold since this happened 4 years ago. It's a genuinely safe neighborhood now, but after that experience, I'll never ever walk out my front door by myself in the middle of the night again, even if it means waking up to a stinky kitchen. As a child, I lived in a fairly small apartment with a few family members since we were fairly poor. I shared a room with my mother until I moved a few years ago. We lived in a pretty old, worn down apartment. When I was 6, I had my first experience out of many with this ghost. One night we had our door open as my mother went to the bathroom. It was then that I saw this figure run across the hallway from the doorway. After that, I told my mother about it, and since I was still young, she shrugged it off as my imagination, although she had also seen the ghost a few times before. After that, I started to have the same nightmare pretty frequently until I was like 11 or 12. The best way to describe it is like this. I had just woken up in the middle of the night. I tried to wake my mom, but she wasn't budging. I would do that action until I decided to get up and try to go to my aunt's room. After leaving the room, I would see this mysterious figure and they would run at me. Then I would wake up most of the time scared and crying. The last and most horrifying encounter I had with them was when me and my mother were alone in the room and all of a sudden we heard, "Help me," in a male's voice. We thought it was from outside since we lived in a sketchy neighborhood and it was midnight. No one was outside our window or our door. At that point we were freaked out, so my mother decided to just cover the whole house in holy water, pray, and have a conversation with the ghost. We never heard from them again. This happened a year or two ago, so I was around 17 or 18 years old. After coming home from my best friend's house late at night, probably midnight to 1 a.m., I pulled into my reserved spot in my driveway, which was perpendicular and offset to the right of my garage. The driver's side door faced my house, so it allowed me to see into my backyard, which is pretty large and kind of creepy at night. None of the outdoor lights were on, so all that illuminated the yard were my headlights. As I was turning into my spot, I saw what looked like a pair of white translucent legs walking away from my house and towards my pond. At first, I thought it was a burglar, so I immediately got out of my truck and took out my bat and flashlight from my back seat to ward off whoever possibly broke in. I began to check everywhere around where they could have been and I found nothing. I thought maybe they got away, until I realised they couldn't have and that I would have cornered them on my dock, which was connected to the pond in between my house and the pond. I was visibly confused because none of what I saw made sense. I tried to assess the situation before coming to a conclusion, so I thought back on the fact that whatever it was translucent, was white. It only had legs. It looked too human to be an animal, and too animal to be a human, if that makes any sense. It left no footprints in the grass, and it seemed to disappear as soon as I got out of my truck. If it was a human or animal, I would have seen it run around the pond or anywhere for that matter. I was terrified. I quickly got my things and ran into my house. As soon as I got in, I checked the windows and doors, which were all locked. My parents were even watching a movie in the living room with the dogs who bark at everything that moves and makes noise. I asked them if they saw or heard anything, and they both said no. I've seen this torso-less figure only one other time a couple of months later, which happened to be under the same circumstances. Coming home late at night, no lights on outside, etc., except for the fact that it was on the other side of the pond, moving next to the edge of the water towards the road. My best friend has also seen it once or twice on my property, and she described it similar to how I saw it the second time. Like my Shadow Man story, I only mentioned my sightings to her after she told me what she saw. I still have yet to find out what it is or who it was. Any thoughts? The only time I remember seeing it myself was when I was in my old bedroom upstairs, meaning not in the basement. I was around 7 or 8 years old, and in the middle of the night, I woke up and looked at my window, which had blinds and was illuminated by the moon. In front of the window, however, was a black silhouette of a little girl with what looked like short curly hair, almost old-timey looking. I was terrified and thought I was seeing things, so I just rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. The door was opened when I woke up. I asked my parents if they came into my room and they said they didn't. Although I haven't seen it again, my friends have. A couple months or so after I had seen it, I had a sleepover with my best friend at the time, still in the same room. We had slept on the floor because my bed was too small for the both of us. In the middle of the night, my friend woke up and saw that there was a dark shadow man standing over me and just staring down at me sleeping. She told me this when we woke up in the morning, and I noticed my door had been opened. I just figured it was one of my parents checking on us, so I asked both my parents if they came into the room, and they both said no. Years later, I moved into my sister's room, downstairs in the basement, after she moved out. I was 16 or 17 and had forgotten about the shadow person at this point. My best friend spent the night, and she told me in the morning that she saw a shadow figure standing in the corner of the room in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't believe her, until I remembered the two incidents that happened almost a decade prior. I didn't tell either of them about the shadow person stories until after they told me that they saw it. I'm 19 now, and haven't had any of the incidents that I know of since. There was a girl in the park near my home. She was from a nearby town and was living here with her grandpa and grandma. It was during the lockdown that I started going to that park. Little did I know that she had a crush on me. One day, she proposed to me, but I wasn't willing to get into any relationship because my exams were nearing. She was the most beautiful one I'd ever seen though, so it was clear in my head that as soon as my exams end, I'll accept her proposal. But God had his own choice. She was going back to her native town with her family when her car collided with an overspeeding bus. Every family member was injured. They were in the hospital, but she didn't survive. I couldn't even tell her that I loved her. I was saddened like hell. My pain was indescribable. But one day, she appeared in my room. She said, "Don't make Radhika," one of my classmates, cry. She's a pure soul. I thought that it was just my imagination getting wild until she continued, "If you think this is just your imagination, then let me prove it to you that it's not." And she gave me some information about my teacher, friends, and my dad, which even I didn't know. I asked my dad whether what she told me about him was true or completely bullshit, and it came out that she was right. She had given me the right information. Of course it wasn't my imagination, because I didn't even know about this information. She then repeatedly started coming to my dreams, sometimes telling secrets of my friends, or telling exactly which question was coming in my exam. Everything she told was true. She even predicted her father's death, and her father died on that exact date predicted by her. But yesterday, she astonished me by saying, "You are soon going to meet me, on April 5th, 2022. Just make sure you choose Milan Travels for your journey to Jodhpur." I'm sure it was some sort of hypnagogic state that caused me to see this thing in my room. I was never asleep or awakened by it. I was always trying to fall asleep. Then I'd feel a presence in my room, look up and see it and interact with it. It would leave my room, then I'd get up and pinch myself or look at myself in the mirror to be sure I was awake. I've had lots of dreams and I've had lots of night terrors. This was not a night terror. There was nothing terrifying about it. I was always fully awake before, during, and after. It happened at least 5 times over a span of 3 months. The first time, I was laying in bed when I felt it. I looked up, and there it was. Floating on the ceiling above my bed, a twisting cloud of black smoke. I'm not sure why, but of all the times I saw it, I was never afraid. Not even a little. I was somehow 100% positive that it was not a bad thing. It eventually would appear by my bedside and would float in front of me. Several times I ran my hands through it. It never moved, the smoke, or felt like anything. I know it sounds crazy, and this was years and years ago. I'm not schizophrenic or prone to psychosis, never had a psychotic episode. But the last few times I saw it, I talked to it. I know, crazy. But I was just like 10,000% sure that it was a good thing. I was also sure that it was a possibility that it was there only in my mind, that nothing ever really was there, even though I could see it. I didn't care if I was being crazy talking to it. Hey there, good to see you again. And then, bye, when it would float again through the wall and leave. It stopped visiting me, whatever it was. I'm very objectively minded. I don't doubt the possibility of paranormal experiences. But somehow this felt like something or someone I knew very well. Somehow. It didn't feel mysterious or unknown, as weird as it sounds on the face of it. It was a comforting presence, something familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, like locking eyes with a benevolent stranger through the window of a bus. A stranger who seems like they'd be nice. And you don't mind staring as they stare back, because the bus is pulling away and you both know you'll never see them again. The cloud of smoke, I guess, symbolized to me that there was something good out there, behind the curtain, beyond what I could see. That something was watching me and taking care of me. I missed that black cloud. It never spoke to me. It never motioned towards me in any communicative way. It just floated around right in front of my face above me. Sometimes it would fizzle out into nothing. Sometimes it would float away through a wall or a ceiling. Black clouds, if you're out there, it was very nice meeting you, and I hope you're well. Also, I hope that we meet again someday. I hope I'm not crazy, and I know I sound pretty crazy telling this story, but I don't think I am. I'd never seen anything like it before I saw it, and I haven't since. There's something good out there. Something good. I don't know how I knew, how I know, but we don't need to be afraid.